Welcome to the Unstressed Exec, the podcast where we dive deep into the real conversations that help you lead, love, and live with greater clarity, courage, and calm. I'm your host, Dr. George Vergolias, executive coach and clinical forensic psychologist, and I help high-achieving professionals navigate life transitions, resolve conflict with confidence, and build unshakable psychological resilience. So if you're ready to lead with purpose, master conflict with grace, and become more emotionally agile under pressure, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Welcome back to the Unstressed Exec, where we talk about how to perform, lead, and live with clarity, calm, and confidence, even when life feels like it's coming apart at the seams. I'm your host, Dr. George Vergolias, forensic psychologist, executive and resilience coach, and someone who has spent decades studying how manipulation actually works in real relationships, real workplaces, and real lives. As a forensic psychologist, I have given court testimony, I've evaluated repeat offenders, and even serial killers. So the area of manipulation is an area I know well. Before we dive in, a quick reminder. If these conversations resonate with you and you want practical tools to apply what you're learning, check out my workbook, The Conflict Whisperer, From Conflict to Clarity. It's a no BS guide, clinically grounded, designed to help you spot manipulation early, regulate your responses, and protect your clarity in high conflict situations. You can find it on Amazon. I'll leave a link in the show notes. Today's episode is about something that doesn't look abusive at first. It doesn't shout. It doesn't threaten. It doesn't always feel wrong in the moment. It feels reasonable. The episode is titled Emotional Manipulators, Subtle Tactics You're Not Seeing and How to Shut Them Down. Last week, I unpacked gaslighting, and this episode is a continuation of understanding how and why certain people leverage manipulation to get their needs met at your expense. If you haven't listened to last week's, you may want to go back and listen to this one, but it's not required to get the insights out of this one. If you've ever found yourself agreeing to things you didn't want, such as feeling guilty for saying no, explaining yourself endlessly, or wondering how someone always seems to get their way without ever asking directly, this episode is for you. So I'm going to start by talking about what emotional manipulation really is. And we have to start with a clear definition. Emotional manipulation is not influence. Influence is transparent. Manipulation is influence without informed consent. Influence sounds like, here's what I want. Here's why this matters to me. You're free to say yes or no. In contrast, manipulation sounds like this. I'm just disappointed. I guess I'll handle it myself. I thought you cared more. I didn't think you were that kind of person. Manipulation doesn't force you. It nudges you. It creates emotional pressure while preserving plausible deniability. And that's why it's so hard to name. And that's why it's so hard to notice until you're well in its grasp. So why is manipulation so hard to see? The manipulator creates a situation where not doing it feels uncomfortable, selfish, or wrong. And here's the key insight. Manipulators don't exploit your weakness. They exploit your values. This is a critical thing to understand because so often we're looking for gaps. We're looking for weaknesses. We're looking for parts of us that are vulnerable or not aligned or some kind of deficit. Actually, manipulation works because it's exploiting the best part of you, your values, such as your empathy, your responsibility, your sense of fairness, your sense of equity, your loyalty, your desire to be a good person. That's why smart, capable, emotionally intelligent people are often the most vulnerable. If you've ever listened to a documentary, or there's some good shows that depict this as well, about con men or con women, they are called confidence people or a confidence man. Why? Because they are playing on your confidence. They are getting into your home territory, your values, and they're working within that environment to help you feel comfortable. And that's why manipulation, for those that are good at it, can be so devastating. So let's talk about some core manipulation tactics and how they sound. And we're going to walk through the most common ones, exactly as they show up in real life. So the first one I'm going to hit on is guilt tripping. We've all been there on the receiving end of this one. Hopefully it's not a pattern for us. So guilt tripping, here are some common ways you hear this. After everything I've done for you, you go and do this? Or I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. Or I guess I'll just deal with it myself. They're converting your empathy into obligation. And the unspoken message is if you say no, you are somehow a bad person. That's guilt tripping. The other is playing the victim. I can't believe you do this to me. I'm always the one who gets hurt. No one ever considers my feelings. This tactic flips accountability. Suddenly, the person setting a boundary becomes the aggressor. And now the manipulator is suddenly the victim. They become the wounded party. Next is moral superiority. So, a few statements you might hear that capture this. I just thought you had more integrity. Or, I just thought you were a better person. I would never do that to someone I care about. And finally, I guess we just have different values. This is manipulation through identity threat. It pressures you to comply in order to preserve your self-image. Then there's selective generosity. A few examples. I helped you when you needed it most. I was there for you when you needed me. Remember when I covered for you? I didn't have to do that. This creates a sense of invisible but emotional debt. The favor wasn't freely given. They did something, and now they're calling in on their chips. They're calling in on their marker. It was an investment with expected returns. Emotional withdrawal is another category. I don't so much have examples here, but things silence, coldness, distance, passive disengagement, not arguing, no explanation, just absence. All of these types of behaviors, the message is compliance brings connection, resistance brings abandonment. If you comply, oh, we're good. We're connected. I'm present with you. I'm engaged. I'm interactive. But you resist, you push back. Now I'm going to starve you of attention and emotional engagement. Another one is urgency and time pressure. A few examples of this one. I need an answer right now, or you need to decide right now. This can't wait. If you cared, you wouldn't hesitate. Or if you cared, you wouldn't be confused about this. You would know exactly what to do, or you would support me. Urgency shuts down reflection. And by shutting down reflection, it's forcing you into an artificial decision point that doesn't have to happen at the moment. It forces a nervous system response instead of a thoughtful one. This one's really tough. It's really insidious because it's forcing you to make a nervous system emotional reactive response instead of a thoughtful one that serves you. Everyone agrees with me. I talk to them and they see it my way. You're the only one here that is having a problem. They're isolating you out. They're blocking you out. They're icing you out. And this isolates you psychologically and emotionally. It makes disagreement feel socially dangerous. So we've talked through all of these: guilt tripping, playing the victim, moral superiority, selective generosity, emotional withdrawal, urgency and time pressure, and triangulation. And I'm hoping that as I've explained these, you're recognizing in your own life when you've been on the receiving end. And for some of us, we've probably even been on the giving end at times, because again, we're human. But the question is, we're smart, we're bright. If you're listening to this podcast, you're already probably someone that is on a growth trajectory, that prefers to grow, that wants to improve your emotional functioning, improve your emotional and nervous system regulation. And from that angle, you probably have a high emotional IQ and you're probably bright. So the question is, why do we smart people fall for this? Here's something I say to clients all the time, because this question comes up in my coaching all the time. If manipulation relied on stupidity, it wouldn't work. Manipulation works because smart people are trained to self-reflect. When something feels off, you will ask yourself things like, am I being unfair? Am I overreacting? How does this serve me and how does it serve others? And manipulators count on that self-reflection. They know you'll question yourself before questioning them. They know you value harmony over dominance. They know you'd rather resolve tension than escalate it. So they let you do the emotional labor while they reap the benefit. And I'm not saying don't self-reflect. I'm not saying give up your emotional IQ. Not at all. But it is, think of it like a virus detection system, right? If you think of Norton antivirus on your computer, think of a back door. Norton antivirus is wonderful, right? And I'm not an IT guy. I'm not giving a recommendation or an endorsement, but it works. Or you think of just a Mac. Mac has native integrated protections against computer viruses. And again, don't attack me if you're an IT expert or a cybersecurity expert, because I'm getting way out over my skis. But stick with the metaphor. But there's always a back door. In fact, a lot of the worst Trojan horses and other malware, they actually are using strengths of the operating system in order to exploit that as a weakness. Manipulators do the same thing. Gaslighters, as a subset of manipulators, do the same thing. They are using your values, your strong character, your self-reflection ability, your high emotional IQ as a backdoor weakness to try to manipulate. So be mindful of that. Don't give up those wonderful qualities, but be mindful when you're in a relationship when it doesn't feel right and it feels manipulative. Take a step back. Use the self-reflection out of the moment and reflect on that. And again, I urge you to go back and listen to last week's episode on gaslighting because I go into a lot of techniques. I'm going to talk about some of those later as well. So let me give you a quick case example. And this is a what I call the helpful colleague. I once worked with a leader who described a colleague as incredibly supportive, and the colleague always stepped in, always helped, always volunteered, and over time the favors escalated. So did the expectations. Then came the pressure. Things like, after everything I've done for you, or they would say, I thought we were a team, or I wouldn't have done this to you. And when my client finally said no, the warmth vanished. The help, the volunteer, the get things done attitude, the do the right thing attitude, all of it began to vanish and quickly. Meetings became tense. Information stopped flowing. Subtle punishment began to follow. And this wasn't generosity that they were seeing initially, it was leverage. They were paying a loan that they didn't even know they took out. And once we named it, my client stopped negotiating emotionally. And then the manipulation collapsed. So many of you are probably wondering as you're listening, okay, I've been in this role, and every time I try to explain myself, it doesn't really go anywhere. There's a reason for that. And here's why explaining yourself tends to make it worse. One of the most common mistakes people make with manipulators is over-explaining. They justify, they defend, they provide context, they try to be understood. They bury the conversation with facts. But here's the truth. Manipulators don't want understanding. That's not what they're seeking. They want compliance. Every explanation gives them more material to work with. They're now spinning their words back against you. And this is where this conversation really does dovetail quite nicely with last week's, where I talk about gaslighting in much more detail. But the more information you give them, now they have more angles. So imagine you have a code, the coding that you do, your lines of code, literally. Well, now you've got triple the coding. And if the same potential vulnerabilities existed in the original code, maybe they were small mistakes, small oversights, now you've tripled it. So now you've given the cyber attacker even more potential weak areas that they can exploit. And again, don't beat me up. If you're working in cybersecurity or IT, I understand it's not a perfect metaphor, but most of us will generally understand it. Shutting down manipulation doesn't require confrontation. It requires clarity and containment. I'll say that again, clarity and containment. And here are the principles that matter most. And there's 5 of them. Number 1, be brief. Don't give them the ammunition, as we just talked about. You might say, I'm not available for that. That doesn't work for me, or that doesn't serve me, or I'm going to pass. No story, no justification, no apology. You're setting a boundary. You're being clear on where you stand. Second, delay your response, especially if you feel like you're being pulled in emotionally or feeling forced or coerced or persuaded heavily to do something or take action. So instead, just say, let me think about this, or let me get back to you. Time dissolves the immediate pressure that you're feeling. Number 3, refuse the emotional frame. If they present guilt, don't accept it. If they present urgency, you don't have to buy into it. Don't rush, especially if it's a false sense of urgency. They may be urgent, but you don't have to be. If they present victimhood, don't rescue them. That's their bag. That's not yours. Respond to the request, not the emotion. They're asking you for something. Consider the request on its own merits, but don't get caught into guilt, urgency, victimhood. Don't play the game. Fourth, hold the boundary without defending it. But remember, boundaries don't need consensus. If you don't want someone touching you at work, touching your shoulder, putting their hand on the small of your back, especially if you're a woman, and that makes you uncomfortable, you don't have to explain yourself. That doesn't need consensus. You don't need the other person to agree to it. That's a boundary that you have. Boundaries don't need consensus. They need consistency. And fifth, watch what happens when you say no. And this is critical. Watch their reaction. Healthy people adjust. They calibrate. Even if they're upset at first, they will adjust. Manipulative people escalate with guilt, or they withdraw, or they retaliate. It's a very different response versus healthy people. That reaction tells you everything that you need to know. So the question is, what happens when you do say no? What happens when you stop playing the game? Well, when you stop engaging emotionally, one of 2 things happen. Either the person, the manipulator, recalibrates. If they're not, let me explain this. If they're manipulating out of a need in the moment, but they're not necessarily an insidious or repeat manipulator, that they can possibly recalibrate. And the relationship becomes healthier because you work through the differences. Or the relationship can deteriorate because it was built on manipulation. So when you stop playing the game, notice how they respond. If they recalibrate and you're able to move forward at the same level or hopefully even stronger, that's a good sign. If it falls apart, that's a bad sign. It means that their connection to you was based on the degree to which they can manipulate you and get something out of you. Both outcomes are information. Both outcomes are feedback. Use them as such. And both outcomes are progress because you're learning, how do I respond to these different situations and go forward? All right, let me give you some closing reflections as I always do. Manipulation thrives in ambiguity. It loves a vacuum. So the more that you don't set boundaries, the more that you are not clarifying where you stand or where they stand, manipulation loves to get into the corners. It's, again, back to our computer cyber analogy. It loves to find those small little loopholes it can weasel in on and get at you. It dies in clarity. You don't shut manipulation down by being harsher. You shut it down by being clearer, by saying less, by slowing down, and by trusting yourself. And by remembering this one key point, anyone who benefits from your confusion is not operating in your best interests. You want people in your life that are benefiting from your clarity, as well as your boundaries. It will allow you to reset your nervous system and then give you the tools to navigate conflict in every relationship. It's available now on Amazon, and I will leave a link in the show notes. And remember, insight without action changes nothing. If you're ready to turn awareness into strength and stress into strategy, executive and resilience coaching can help you accelerate that shift. You can find me at www.theunstressedexec.com or on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube as The Unstressed Exec. Until next time, I'm Dr. George Vergolias. Thank you for listening as always. And remember, shift happens.